Science of Mind class. And so we're just playing musical pulpits this morning. It's a blast. It really is great. And that's one of the things that we find in the midst of this crazy time, right? In the pandemic and sheltering and staying at home and all of the working at home, all of those kinds of things, right? What's been really extraordinary is to watch our spiritual community practice the spiritual practice of looking for the good, finding the good and praising it, right? And that we are actually getting to do cool stuff like this. We've had more musicians and other guest speakers than we might normally have because it's much easier for the people to just zoom in. It is so fabulous. And so part of the process of all of this, bringing our spirituality to bear in life, right, is to bring it to the moment, every moment, whatever the moment is. And sometimes the moment is not great. Sometimes it's actually less than not great. Sometimes it's downright bad or terrible. And sometimes that's an outer experience. And other times it's what's going on in here, right? And the conversation we're having with ourselves and the things that we're doing when we're all triggered and we just want the world to go away. Or we want to crawl into a hole, or we just want to lambaste everybody, right? And all of those things, all of those times are, of course, the times when we are most called to our spiritual practice. And so as we move into the month of December, celebrating divine truth, we're beginning the month by this kind of maybe not so exciting idea of welcoming the shadow, actually welcoming our engagement with these dark times and dark moments and finding what is actually the opportunity there. Now, it's fascinating to start the Celebrating Divine Truth and our holiday season with this idea of welcoming the shadow. Because throughout this month, we do nothing but celebrate the light. So in Hanukkah, right, we're in the middle of Hanukkah right now, and Hanukkah is the Feast of Lights. And if you recall the story, right, the whole point of the story is when the Maccabees took back the temple in Jerusalem, there was only enough oil for one day of the eternal flame. And yet it takes 8 days to press new oil from olives. And of course, the miracle is the eternal flame burned for 8 days. And that eternal flame representing and the expression of the infinite reality of light. Of course, in the solstice, we celebrate the fact that despite the fact that it's dark and cold in the middle of winter, the light does come back. And some people celebrate the solstice as the scaring away the dark, right? And others celebrate the yin yang nature of light and dark. But we recognize that no matter how dark it is, the light comes back. Of course, on Christmas Eve, we do our candle lighting services. We celebrate the incarnation of light in every individual in all of creation. And in Kwanzaa, we light the Kinara to really engage with the idea that this light is coming into community and that we are intentional about this, right? So the entire holiday season is about light. And we as metaphysicians, as spiritual people, we can become very enamored with the light. And rather than holding light and dark as yin yang, or even being thinking about the darkness as like slaying our dragons, we can out and out avoid the dark and do a spiritual bypass that we're simply going to focus on the light. And we are going to ignore the dark and those things that are in our shadow. Now, the term shadow, as you may or may not know, comes from depth psychology from Carl Jung. And it is the idea of all of those things that we are not aware of. Sounds suspiciously like the science of mind, doesn't it? Unearthing all those hidden beliefs, all those false ideas, all those patterns that are like programs running in the background that came on that came on the computer that you didn't ask for, and then you have a hard time figuring out how to get rid of. Yeah, those, right? all of those things, that's all of that, it is somewhat equated. We can make a similar equation to this idea of the shadow. And Carolyn Mace, who is one of our foremost depth psychologist writers, who you may be familiar with, one of the things that I think is so amazing about her work with the shadow is that her statement is, the shadow is where our gold lies. The shadow is where our gold lies. And so that's what it means to welcome the shadow, is to seek the gold. Now, what does it mean that the shadow is where the gold lies? And how does the shadow relate to all this light that we're celebrating? We're celebrating it all holiday season, and we're celebrating it in our metaphysics, in our spirituality, right? And so the thing to really, the thing I'd like for us to take up today in this season of light is that it is the light that actually allows us to look at the shadow. It is the light that illuminates the dark places. And if we are not afraid of that, we can mine those dark places for the gold. Now, we've been seeing this in the pandemic, right? We've been seeing not only the gold that we've been celebrating, the good that we've been able to find, but we've also been seeing the darkness, the places where our healthcare system doesn't work, the places where different ethnicities and pockets of people are much more affected than others, whether it's race or age or socioeconomic status. We've seen it in our politics over the last year, over the last 4 or 5 or 6 years, in this incredible divisiveness. We've also seen what is in the shadow of the psyche of the American culture and the American people. And we can run screaming from it. We can be angry about it, or we can recognize that it is actually the light that we have been calling forth, creating a world that works for everyone, which is illuminating the shadows, and to welcome that illumination. Now, for me, I really began to embrace this idea as I began to think about, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. And then I moved to the Northwest, which had I moved into an area that had a strong Californian influence. And for the first time, I saw something that was called a ranch house. A ranch house, one story, everything on one story, right? Then I moved to Texas, more ranch houses. Wait, where's the basement? Where's the attic? Okay, so I grew up in a 4-story house. It was a full basement, unfinished. We had our washer and dryer down there. We had our play area down there for the kids. We had the kitty litter box down there too. We had all kinds of things down there. And it was a full, we had the big old furnace, the big old spooky furnace down there, right? And then we had 2, floors to live on, the living area on the first floor, the bedrooms and the bathroom on the second floor. And then there was a staircase up to the 4th floor, the attic. Now, while we played in the basement, the attic was where we stored everything. The luggage and the old clothes and the furniture that, we weren't using at the moment and whatever. Well, let me just tell you that while we weren't supposed to play in the attic, it was a super fun place to play in. The attic was super fun, right? And so we would go up there, especially we would like to go up there at night with the flashlight, because of course, you know what happens. You creep up the stairs, you start pointing your little flashlight around and you go, oh, it's a ghost. Oh, this is a boogeyman. It's a boogeyman. Oh my gosh, what's there? Right? And there's all those creepy shadows until you get a little further in and you've thoroughly scared yourself, right, witless. And you point that flashlight and you realize, oh, wait, that's just my mother's old fur coat, right, hanging on a hanger with some hat box behind it on a shelf. And it looks like a ghoul or something. All those dark and creepy places, right, those are just the shadows created by the boxes or the furniture. And they've interwoven to make some weird little scene back there. But the minute that the light is shown on it, we get to say, oh, well, that's just the rocking chair sitting in front of a box with a big bag hanging behind it. And that's all it is. And I can see it clearly. I can see what it is. And do you see, it is in shining the light on it that we get to see it clearly. Oh, that's just an old dress hanging there. It's not a ghost at all. So this is, I think, exactly what happens when we are willing to welcome the shadow into the light, or we are unafraid to bring our light and turn and look squarely at the shadow, squarely at those things that are running in the background of our consciousness that we hold in our subjective mind, in our subconscious. That, and of course, by definition, if it's the shadow, we actually have become alienated from it. And the more alienated we are from it, the more frightening it becomes. Just like tiptoeing in the attic and seeing things out of the corner of our eye and being afraid to look at it because we're afraid of what we're going to see. So our task in welcoming the shadow is to shine the light and go, oh, look, that's just a false belief of separation. Oh, wait, no, that's just a way I learned to deal with conflict when I was a kid. That's not who I am anymore. Oh, I see that I've stored a whole bunch of old ideas about life, and they're just sitting here creating a big black shadow that I no longer believe in. Oh, here's the gold sequins dress that I used to wear all the time when I felt really good about who I was, and I've packed it away because I've forgotten that part of me. Do you see, it's not just the crappy stuff that's in there. It's all of the parts of us that we don't own, that we aren't willing to be, which includes some of the gold of who we have become frightened of becoming. So there's all kinds of things in the shadow, just like there's all kinds of things stored in the basement or in the attic that are worth pulling out and taking a look at. So as we have been in this wonderful pandemic and in this wonderful being at home, one of the things that I've really noticed in talking with a lot of people is, despite the very real, absolutely real crisis that it has brought to some families in terms of financial crisis, health crisis. We've had people in our own community that have lost up to 15 and 20 family members to death, to COVID. So we know that that's truly a real experience for people. And yet many people have been able to, with their spiritual practice, to really take up this whole thing differently. And I imagine some of you too have really been able to do that. Perhaps being at home has helped illuminate some of the things that actually you've realized are more important. Some of the things that I've heard talked about, that I've seen or that I've read about, is one of the things, that many things that have become illuminated. One is our acquisitiveness and how much we feel like if we can go shopping and buy stuff, it'll make us feel better. Our need for constant entertainment. What's been illuminated is our sense of disconnection and perhaps the lack of real intimate connections that we've had. We've illuminated racism, separation, superiority. We've illuminated how power and money and prestige are playing out, and how much that race for that some of us have been involved in maybe has taken us away from the dinner table, from the family, from our own inner centeredness and peace. And so we have the opportunity, as we welcome the shadow, is to bring the light to all of this and to simply allow it to be illuminated. Ernest Holmes writes, the word light, as used in the Bible, is the symbol of spiritual illumination. It is the inner capacity in us to perceive a divine idea and to assimilate it into our consciousness. Any idea assimilated into consciousness must then express in our experience. He goes on to write, darkness is always the symbol of ignorance, while light is the symbol of wisdom and truth. Celebrating the divine truth, bringing light to our own ignorance, that somehow anything in the darkness can hurt us, when it is simply that which is back there that we want to bring into our conscious awareness, look at clearly, illuminate with the light. In Buddhism, they have a term for this. It's called enlightenment. Now, you may think enlightenment is some esoteric thing where you need to be able to walk on water like Jesus, or materialize and dematerialize, or levitate when you're meditating. But truthfully, enlightenment means one thing. It means to be awake, to be aware, to be conscious. And that's what we're doing. When we are welcoming the shadow, bringing the light, we learn to be comfortable with being awake and conscious, even of those things which we have up until now maybe not wanted to look at, not wanted to see. And yet it is in the seeing that the healing begins. Do you see what happens when we don't want to look at things? Is that we are hiding them from the light, right? To not bring the light means that we are hiding the truth. So the one truth that we're hiding, some truths that we're hiding, are our feelings, our thoughts, our fears, our sense of lack and limitation, and ultimately our sense of separation. And we hide those in our shadow because we don't want to admit it and we don't like the way it feels. On the other hand, we're also hiding in our shadow our most beautiful self, our uniquest, precious, slightly odd way of being in the world. Our deepest desires and our truest nature often gets hidden in the shadows because we don't think it's okay, or we've been taught it's not okay. So welcoming the shadow is to bring the light to all these things. Now, thinking about the light, let me just tell you another really interesting, really mind-blowing awareness that I had. It wasn't actually all that long ago. Maybe this is like old hat for you, but it was really an astonishing thought when I thought, wait a minute, do you know that plants eat sunlight? Like, that's what they're doing. Plants are eating sunlight. And they are converting it to food, which gives them the energy to live. They're like literally eating sunlight. That's what photosynthesis is. I mean, that's like wild. That'd be like going outside and opening your mouth and letting the sunlight, like, okay, I'm going to eat. It's like a wild thought. But then think about this. Our entire food system, whether you're vegan, vegetarian, or omnivore, we all eat plants. So we're all eating sunlight as well. And that's the ultimate building block of the food chain. The ultimate building block of the food chain is light, which is not that different than what quantum physics is teaching us. Quantum mechanics is teaching us that one of the smallest particles that they are interested in, that is considered maybe sort of a building block, they're not quite sure, but they talk about this thing called photons of light. Photons of light, which are little packets of information, and they are a wave particle. Not sometimes a wave and sometimes a particle. They are a wave particle, which means they are both there and not there at the same time. Do, 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 right? And it's light. And it's the source of the information that creates all of the outpicturing that we see in creation, on which all of that is built. Okay, the other thing that's really interesting is that because of that, because everything is eating light and photons of light are everything is made out of photons of light. So we're getting it like from both directions, right? That they've actually taken pictures. Do you know that not just fish in the sea are luminescent and not just little fireflies are luminescent, that human beings are also bioluminescent. They can now take a picture of that, and it's not like an aura picture. It's like they can take a picture of the bioluminescence of an individual human body. They've also taken pictures of the fact that when we're sharing space, we're actually sharing photons of light. We're literally sharing photons of light. Now, this is what we spiritually understand, that the nature of reality, of physical reality, is always a reflection of spiritual reality. So we are forever fed by the light of the divine presence, by the light of divine truth. We're forever being fed by that. We are made out of the very light of the divine presence. This is the divine truth. And it is forever expressing itself in, through, and as us. And when we drink of the light and we allow the light to be the truth of our being, do you see that's what Jesus meant when he said to drink from the living waters? That's what Buddha was doing when he was sitting beside the river and he heard the Om in the sound of the water itself. He heard the universal sound, the universal oneness in the water itself. To experience this, that we are constantly being fed by the light. Now this is the divine truth. How can there be anything in the darkness that could be too much for that light? Do you see? How is that possible? We're talking about divine light, the divine truth. There is no darkness that can withstand that, just like there's no darkness in the attic that can withstand coming up with a flashlight. Even if you have to move around a box and illuminate behind the box and discover there's nothing there, it was just a shadow. Ernest Holmes says this about light. In flashes of illumination, the inspired have seen into the very center of reality and have brought back with them a distinct impression of what they have seen and felt. A glimpse of this reality illumines the whole being with a flood of light. That's what we do when we open ourselves to the light and allow the darkness to be revealed and released, or quite frankly welcomed, recognizing it's not something that we need to be afraid of. The things that we hide in the shadow aren't all bad. They're not all old tapes that we don't want anymore. They're not all false beliefs or limitations or lack. Those are things we bring up to heal, to dispel. But there's also the gold of our uniquest self, our most precious being, our deepest desires. That's also there in the shadow, that which we have disowned. And so when we welcome the shadow, we're welcoming the truest part of ourselves, that part which Marianne Williams says is the part that frightens us the most. The glory of God that we are, the divine light, the presence, the being of love and light that we came here to be, the incredible lives that we came here to experience and to express, the contribution that is ours to make. Yeah. So when we welcome this shadow, we are bringing all of that to the light and allowing the light to take over. Ernest Holmes says this: ye are the light of the world. Well, of course, Jesus said that. It's in quotes. Ye are the light of the world. But Ernest Holmes goes on to say, we are the candle of the Lord. How important then this light is to keep trimmed and burning with the oil of pure spirit through the wick of peace and joy. In this way do we glorify the indwelling God, who is the heavenly Father and the cosmic mother of all. I'm going to close with this reading from the Voice Celestial. No better way can be than that you share what faith you have with those who need such care and have still less hope and faith. Though dim your torch, It still may light the lamp of him who has a greater need. And from your faint belief, his soul may flare into a saint. The grace with which you act, the love displayed, will raise men's faith in love, and by such aid they will be healed. So, seeing others healed, your grain of faith becomes a harvest field, and you shall reap what you yourself have sown, a greater faith, which then becomes your own. So let the divine truth illuminate the shadow. Welcome it. Bring the light. See what's there so that you too may shine brightly. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you. Thank you. Give her some love. That was powerful and amazing. So, Reverend Petra, I didn't ask you in advance, but would you be so kind as to speak a word for us and bless us with some prayer to conclude that fabulous message?
I would love to. I just didn't know if you wanted me to, but I would be happy to.
Let's do it.
Good. So let's turn within. Remembering and knowing that there is one infinite power and presence, the light of the world, the light of life, that divine indwelling, overarching macrocosmic reality, whose impulse is love, the desire to give itself into creation, to express and to be and to become all that is possible. That infinite light, that infinite life is peaceful, beautiful, powerful, abundant, whole, perfect, and complete in every way, just as the sunlight simply is light. And that life is my life, and it is your life, and it is the life of all people on the planet, it is the life of all beings everywhere, it is the life of all creation. In that light, we are bound together as one. In that truth, we express that light. In the love, we bring that light forward. So I simply affirm and declare this holiday season that more and more the shadows are illuminated and they dissipate before the light of this truth, before the light of the love. Whether it is shadows in our own life, shadows in our family, shadows in our culture, shadows in our nation, or shadows on the planet. I declare that we welcome the recognition, the awareness. We bring light so that truth is revealed, healing happens, and that we reclaim the magnificence of what it means to be spiritual beings having a human experience on this grand and glorious blue jewel of a planet that we share together. I bless it. I'm grateful to speak these words and to know that the universal law simply says, yes, this is the truth, and must now manifest it for each and every one of us. I call it good and blessed. I let it be. And so it is.
And so it is.